Houda is a medical doctor, AI scientist, and health technology consultant. Her interest in augmenting medical technology in industry with AI brought her from Marrakech to Montreal. She is now applying her passion for responsible AI towards building an accessible and inclusive solution. Houda is also highly involved in the community initiatives that promotes women in technology and digital literacy. She's an active member of Women Tech Makers Montreal and a Google Developer Group Cloud Organizer. So very happy to have you, Houda. So I'll pass the microphone to you.
Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me well? Yep. So I'm very happy to be speaking about some considerations to have when using AI for products, especially in medicine. So, I'm originally from Marrakech. I graduated from med school, and when you graduate, you have an oath, and we're all familiar with the do no harm. I really believe that do no harm should not be limited to the medical profession. We're working on tools that will impact people when we're working on technology tools. So we need to be mindful and make sure that we're not harming. So for the next minutes, I'll be sharing my thoughts about how you can apply AI to your solutions. I'll be using healthcare as a support. And I'm clearly not pretending that I'll be able to cover everything that you need to do, but I hope that I'll give you enough to go look for the details or come talk to me in the breakout rooms or later. Next slide, please. So when we develop our AI products, we know this classic cycle of data collection, training and evaluating models, and generating predictions. The arrows go, in a cycle. Sometimes you have them, you go back and forth between every single block. But if you want to tell the real story, then next slide, please. This cycle is actually us. We are collecting the data. We are deciding on the metrics that we're going to use. And we get impacted by the results. And the truth is that human perceptions are going to shape every facet of AI. So we want to make sure that whatever we do it correctly. Next slide, please. So I think everyone here who's working with machine learning systems, designing them, know that we need the data. Data sets are important. When we're in healthcare, or actually regardless of being in healthcare or not, the tools we build, we need to build them for everyone. In healthcare, data sets are very difficult to get. From what, we have privacy concerns, we have regulations, and then assuming that you qualify to access, then the medical data itself is messy. But and the issue is not only that it's messy, it's also very biased. And the data is biased because medicine historically has been developing tools, using metrics that did not have everyone in mind. Some examples are, for example, the study about pulse oximetry. So when the researchers analyzed oximetry, so how you measure oxygen, with those little pins or tools that you put on your index, and they give you a percentage of oxygen saturation. So they compared this measure with actual concentration of oxygen in blood, and then they realized that Black patients had nearly 3 times the frequency of occult hypoxemia, meaning they had less oxygen in reality in their blood. So this was 3 times lower than white patients. Now, say that we want to be very mindful, and when we collect our data, we're like, so I'm going to try to include everyone. Even if you have a balanced data set in terms of the people that you're including, well, the measures themselves are already biased, because what we have as predictors and what we're using is just a reflection of those issues. Some other examples would be using other EHR data and using 1 year of medical history to predict some kind of outcome. And Dr. Obermeyer, whose work is really amazing, have been looking at this. And on one of his lab's study, what they realized is they were trying to use historical data for predicting stroke by looking at 1 year of medical data for patients. But then they quickly realized that the only thing they were using, these proxies were the usage of the healthcare system itself, and people who could actually afford to go to a doctor for minor injuries or for things within 1 year multiple times. So be mindful when you collect your data. Not just the obvious. Think and go a little bit deeper. Next slide, please. So then the other thing that we need to do is to make sure that we measure things that matter the most. We have seen all those headlines saying, oh, we have AI systems that beat doctors for XYZ task. But is the human performance really what you want to be using? So this is something that you need to think about. Are you not using this performance and encompassing some biases as well? But the other thing is the metrics that you're going to use to evaluate your models. Accuracy is not enough. For example, in case of a medical diagnosis, well, what's the cost and what's the impact of having a false positive versus a false negative? And a classic example to think about is if you're detecting cancer on some data sets for some patients, well, what's the impact of you being accurate or not versus the impact of actually having a false positive or false negative rate. So once again, you need to your users need to understand. The developers need to understand what the tools they are building, and to understand this, you really need to have a conversation with the domain experts. You need to build these tools within a team, and your team is not only the data scientist, the AI scientist, and the software developer. It's also the doctor or the patient, because healthcare tools are not just for doctors. Sometimes, you need your patients as the end users as well. And then next slide, please. And, you want to build tools that your users can trust. You really want to establish this level of trust. It goes a lot hand in hand with the communication and including them in the very, very early stage. And when you think you have explained everything and you understood everything, then maybe you haven't. So here, obviously the girl explained that it's a trust game, and when you're gonna fall, I'm gonna be here for you. Forgot to mention that you need to fall backward, right? So this will happen. Your systems will fail. Now, what do you do when it's going to fail? You need to define fallback policies and to avoid catastrophic failures. Also need to know, you need a safe fail mode or something that at least keep in mind and have something that is going to reflect why your model is not performing. And this is good not only for your end user, but even for you when you design and you develop your model as the actual AI scientists. And these are really, I'm barely brushing the surface of things that you need to keep in mind. But can you put the next slide, please? The big picture is even bigger than what you're seeing here. So before starting a project, you need to think about, is this really what I need to be doing? Is the project worth developing? Am I answering the right question? Is this the proper need? So you need to scope correctly. There's a lot of work to be done in terms of data literacy and AI literacy. And you want to educate the domain experts the same way they're going to get to you. And then in the data set, all those notions of bias, of diversity, the consent is important. Privacy is very important. When you develop your model, on top of your metrics, you need fairness. And the definition of fairness is not even very clear. So what is fairness? How can you have explainable AI tools? And then one very, very important part of it is when you deploy your model, you need a way to audit this model. You need to make sure that you assess real-world performance and to report this model performances. And with that, there's also everything, all the policy part, and this is outside of my field, but we need standards to which we expect machine learning systems to be held, and we need clear processes to audit those systems, for patient safety and for user safety in general. Next slide, please. So I'm just giving a little bit of guidelines, and I wanted to really include this amazing woman here. So Dr. Gitchoya is an interventional radiologist, and she is really involved in fairness and explainability in AI systems. Michaela's lab is also running monthly ML experts sessions where she has clinicians and she has ML developers, and everyone jumps in, and the conversation is very open. I will invite you to check this out as well. And then Rachel Thomas is co-founder of FastAI, and she really, really talks a lot about data ethics, but also, a lot of AI in medicine and all the social considerations when developing our tools. So they will say, and I mean, just try to find them, follow them on Twitter or on their websites. They really, really, really have a lot to teach all of us. And then, if I can help in any way, please feel free to reach out to me as well. Thank you.